Hello, everyone. Today, the world is celebrating the power of inclusion and the invincible strength of women for equal opportunities, for well deserved recognition, and mostly to celebrate the spirit of women across the globe. There is no denying the fact that women associates, partners, and stakeholders bring in diversity of thoughts and ability to work as well as society at large. Having said that, inequality and biasness still exist, and we still see low representation of women, especially in the areas of technology and climbing the corporate ladder to executive leadership. Hence, this year's International Women's Day's theme is very bold: break the bias, break the gender bias, break the language bias, break the age bias, break the capability bias. Today, on this panel discussion, let's break the bias, one perspective at a time. Let me introduce our three panelists here, three wonderful women leaders who have achieved great heights in their careers, irrespective of many hurdles. Please join me in knowing these three women who are brands in themselves, symbolic of aspirations of millions of young girls and aspiring women in technology and business. And let's hear their journey of breaking barriers in life, the difference they brought into people and business and society around them. For me personally, I'm a mother of two young boys. My older one was 4 years old when once at the toy store, when we were looking for a toy for his friend, a friend's birthday, who was a girl, I chose a doll and said he chose a car. And he said, Mom, I want to take this car for her. And I said, don't you think she would like this doll a little bit more? Then he said, No, I don't think so. He said, No, but I said, No, but she's a girl. She may not like cars. And then he said, But mom, you are a girl and you drive. That day was a startling kind of difference for me because I realized if I had a lot of toy cars, maybe I would have driven a little bit more better. Coming back to the ladies here, wonderful three women leaders, we want to learn small little insights from their life today. Let's welcome Christi Marrufo, Vice President, Knowledge Management and Collaboration Solutions at Applied Materials. Christi is named one of the 50 most powerful women in technology. Christi is a board of director at the Kids Acting Foundation. She is a board member of Down Syndrome Association of Central Texas and has worked with Texas Department of Human Services and was a director of regulatory licensing in Texas Department of Agriculture. Such diverse domains, job roles. Her mission is to accelerate innovation and learning rates by improving productivity, collaboration, and knowledge visibility across applied materials in 21 countries and 31,000 users. She is active in disability rights advocacy, is on the board of directors of Upward for Women Austin chapter. Christi has managed a wide variety of IT services and support operations over her career, including help desk, data center, identity management, database services, enterprise monitoring, and a lot more. So, Christi, tell us a little bit more about Christi that we don't know yet. And why do you believe that clear is kind?
Thank you very much, Shruti, and thank you for inviting me to be here on International Women's Day. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I have four kids, two generations of kids, two grown ones and two that are still at home. One of my daughters has special needs, so that's why I'm very involved in disability rights advocacy. And Clear is kind. This is something I borrowed from Brene Brown. When I was first starting out in my career as a leader, and mostly the people I looked around the room who were other managers were men, and they acted and they had an approach that was different than mine. And I felt a little bit insecure about it, to be honest with you, because I was raised to be nice and to be not ever hurt anyone's feelings. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But one of the things that I heard Brene Brown say at a women's conference here in Texas years ago is that clear is kind, that we don't do anyone a kindness by not speaking the truth, by not speaking the truth clearly, and not dancing around it like I know some of us tend to do. And so that really helps me position it so that if I'm speaking clearly, if it's especially if it's a hard message or if there's any conflict, it really helps me to anchor that this is really the kindest thing for everybody involved to communicate clearly and honestly and not to hold back.
Thank you, Christi. So tell us about COVID times and women professionals juggling home and work.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I know my kids are a little bit older, so I was fortunate that they were able to do their schooling at home pretty independently. I will say there were internet battles going on at our house in the beginning for internet bandwidth. I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that. But you know, a lot of my colleagues and employees, we watched families in general, and oftentimes the burden of this fell more on the women, really struggle to make sure that the kids stayed engaged at school, that we kept our productivity up at working from home, dealing with the interruptions and embarrassment of a kid busting in the room crying, or the doorbell ringing and the dog barking in the middle of an important meeting. So I know it's been really, really hard, and I've been encouraging my employees and colleagues to really prioritize self-care right now. And it's really hard to do. And hopefully as we're coming out of this, we'll all feel a little bit of relief now. But, your day could be taken up all day from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed with either schooling or work. If you don't set appropriate boundaries for yourself. So that's kind of the thing that I focused on and that I encouraged my colleagues to focus on. And that's sometimes hard for women to do, right? So we need to encourage each other to take that time and give each other permission to do that.
That is great to understand about how personal and professional lives have intertwined during this pandemic, and for forever they have, just the modes of working have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So your bracelet says that we can do hard things.
Yeah, yeah. I have a bracelet that I wear here. I'll get it in camera, and I bought this for me and my daughters. Because one of the things that I saw as I was raising girls and looking back at my own childhood is I don't think girls are encouraged to take risks and do hard things enough. I think as a society and a culture, and most cultures around the world, we encourage boys to push through the pain, or push through, but we may with the girls, we may say, oh, that's hard, you don't have to do that. So we have a saying around our house. I even have a sign on one of my walls in the living area that we can do hard things. Some things are hard and they're worth taking on and taking a risk. And so I remind myself of that a lot, and I remind my girls and the women around me that we do hard things all the time, and we should be confident in our ability to take on hard things and support each other in that.
Absolutely. So Christi, what is your pastime then? Or do you always work like every other woman is supposed to work?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big reader. I love, I've been a big reader all my life. More recently, I tend to read more nonfiction on a variety of topics. Even though I'm in the business of IT, my studies were in psychology. So that's a topic that I still find very interesting. And I try to read up on that, especially as it relates to leadership and organizational effectiveness. But I also like a good mystery novel and a thriller as well. So I go back and forth. And also, my family recently bought a piece of property that we're kind of setting up our own little ranch out here in Texas. And so we're educating ourselves and learning about that. So I'm spending a lot of time on that.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'll pick up on the psychology bit a bit. Have you ever been jealous of men?
Yeah, yeah, I have, especially first thing out of bed in the morning, going to that first morning meeting. It seems to me that it's a lot easier to do that if you're a man than you're a woman. I think grooming expectations and dress and all of that. So. And then I've traveled a lot in my career. I've been very fortunate at Applied Materials to be able to travel the world. And it's been a big privilege. But also, I think as I look at my male colleagues, think about their travel and where they're going to stay and who's going to pick them up. And, I see that they don't have the same concerns that I do for my personal safety and things that I have to think about that they don't have to. And then there's this, especially in the beginning of my career, I felt like that there was this camaraderie between the men that it was hard for me to punch into and become a part of. And I was kind of jealous of that, camaraderie that I saw my male colleagues have with each other. Those are just a few examples over the years.
Thank you. You testified what I always kind of don't like to hear. Ladies first, right? First to wake up in the morning. First. Anyways, since you've touched upon this already, let me ask you, how do then strong women break strong barriers without getting hurt?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, sometimes you're going to get hurt. That goes back to the we can do hard things. If you're taking risks and pushing yourself, it's inevitable that you're going to fail or get hurt in some way. So I'll start off with that. But I think the thing that I've learned over the years is not trying to pretend like I'm a man and try to act like I'm a man, and to copy what I see my male colleagues, their way of communicating with each other or way of behaving, and trying to be authentic to who I am, because I have a very fabulous boss that I work for, and one of the things that he often reminds me of is my different approach and different thinking and different sensibility is important on on the team that I'm on for me to bring that. And so, being authentic, being true to yourself, not trying to, make yourself into a pretzel to turn yourself into something that you're not. And then knowing that sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes you'll have to back up and restart. Or sometimes you may, have a conflict at work. And it happens to everyone. And so I think normalizing that in some sense is the place that I've come to, that it's hard for everybody to be a leader and to make important work happen in a company, and that it's worth trying, and our voice is important to be in the room.
Sure. So then when we try, we make mistakes. So what has been your biggest mistake and how did you make up for it?
Yeah, I'll say it's two things. One is, I mentioned earlier about being nice. I was socialized very effectively to be nice to people, and so I became very conflict averse. I would avoid a conflict. I would avoid a hard conversation, sometimes for weeks, thinking about it, having it weigh on my mind constantly, um, um, uh, worrying about it, being anxious about it, instead of just having that hard conversation and facing that conflict. And so I have a very smart colleague who gave me coaching years ago that said, it's better to just go into it immediately than carry all this worry and this anxiety around. So that's something I try to do. My tendency is to avoid it. I push myself to say, I'm going to go have this conversation right then and there. And that's something that was hard to learn, but over the years, it's something that I've learned to manage myself better. The other thing that I'll say is, if I could go back in time, I would change how I viewed what was possible for myself, inside myself. Because in the early days of my career, what I found is I had mentors and sponsors who saw things in me and pushed me to try things that I wouldn't have even occurred to me to try for, but they saw that in me and pushed me to do that. So, the thing, I think in the beginning, what limited me more than anything was my own vision of myself, and what was possible for me to aspire to, and what I was capable of. So, if I could go back in time, I would definitely work on my own view of myself internally, what was possible for me, and what I'd like to aspire to. Probably a little bit more. I would be more aspirational than I was in the beginning, because I just didn't see very many women in those positions and didn't think it was possible for me.
Christi, I got goosebumps by listening to this. Let me give you this opportunity to go back to your 10s, to 20s, to your 30s. How would you, as you look back today, you talked about role of women in men in women's careers. You talked about your entire career and how there have been ups and downs. How can you clear paths for young women who are aspiring to be Christies? Can we make more Christies today?
Yeah, so that is definitely, at the phase of career that I'm in right now, that's really a big focus of me. A big focus of mine is, what paths can I clear for the generation that's coming up behind me? And Applied Materials Foundation has a very great initiative called Generation Girl. And Generation Girl invests in nonprofits in areas around the United States where we have a presence, mostly in Austin and the Bay Area, but there's a few other locations as well. And it engages with girls in middle school, high school age, to foster their interest in STEM, but most importantly, let them see women who are in these roles today, so they can see themselves in those roles in the future. So to me, it is one of the most important things for for the young girls to be able to see, women engineers, PhDs, IT professionals, all different kinds of technical roles, being able to see themselves in that. And it really helps if they see women who are in those roles today and coming in and talking to them about it. And you know, if I could go back in time, one of the things that I don't think I don't know if it was a generational thing or if it was me, but I would have tried to form more of a community with my female coworkers. I really think us supporting each other is one of the most helpful things we can do. If I'm if I'm in a room and I have an opportunity to speak up for one of my colleagues, then I should do it. If I see one of my colleagues doing something that I think you know, might be hurtful to their career, then I go talk to them about it and offer some advice. So I think forming that community, supporting each other, challenging each other, pushing each other. If I had to go back and if I could go back in time, that's what I would do more of.
Thank you so much, Christi. This is very, very insightful. Since this is a webinar, we are not able to see the audience. If this was live, then we would be sitting here on the podium and there would be so many claps and so many people talking. I would still like to bring in front of you some of the comments that have come in. We have one very senior leader here with us, Janset, and she agrees to most of the points that you've shared. We have Gitanjali Gupte, who is talking about your point about encouraging girls to do hard things is just awesome. I've got Saurabh, who is asking you on doing things differently. What would you have done differently, if anything at all, if you got a chance to start your career all over again? I think you've answered that.
Mm-hmm.
Partha is asking you, if you get a chance to architect the enterprise world and how they manage the diversity in the most appropriate and respectful fashion, what are those few changes that you would like to make?
Ooh, boy. And that's the tough one. Yeah, I mean, I think in the enterprise we have to examine our systems. You know, most enterprises run on systems that drive, you know, a cadence of decisions that are made. And, you know, I think on top of all of the traditional, you know, DE&I work that happens in most corporations today, where we're raising awareness of the challenges that different communities might face. I mean, all of that needs to happen. But I think also examining the systems and examining where decisions are being made, either in hiring or promoting or rotations or, you know, overseas assignments. Are our systems designed to advance our DEI initiatives? That's the thing that I would look at structurally in an enterprise.
That is awesome. I think this is a perfect segue for me to introduce our next guest here. Let's welcome Shannon Bell, Senior Vice President at Rogers Communications, where she is responsible for all IT systems and delivery, along with shared services for IT platforms, cloud, data, and enterprise architecture. Prior to Rogers, Shannon held executive level roles in technology in North America and Europe with companies including Amdocs, Bridgewater Systems, New Step Networks, Metasolv Software, and Axiom Systems. Shannon holds a US patent for systems and methods for network congestion management using radio access network congestion indicators. Shannon says, working in technology is exciting. Stay curious, love what you do, and seek out challenges that will keep you energized, motivated, and excited. Shannon, I have a lot of questions to ask you, but why don't you start with answering from where Christi left? Tell us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel today. As a woman in technology, International Women's Day really holds a special significance to me. And I love that we have the opportunity to celebrate women and how they authentically show up every day and engage in this dialogue around gender bias. To Christi's last comment on inclusion and diversity, this is something I'm super passionate about. And I think, when you architect an enterprise-wide strategy for inclusion and diversity, it really starts with having the tough conversations, the benchmarks, baselines, where you're at as an organization. And I think that, I totally agree with Christi, systems are a critical piece of the puzzle. And I also think holding yourself to a standard, setting targets, and having meaningful plans around those, and understanding the problems in the process is part of it. So we did a couple things last year that were very effective. We mandated unconscious bias training for all of our hiring managers. First and foremost, understand the problem was really important. And the amount of feedback that I got from people saying, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. The other thing we identified was we weren't seeing diverse slates of candidates. And so you can't hire and have a representative population if you don't even see those candidates in the first place. So we put a lot of focus on our hiring practices, working with our talent acquisition teams to make sure that every slate of candidates we were bringing forward for every role represented the workforce that we felt was important to have. Now, in technology, we generally have good representation. So we are lucky, and we've made huge strides in terms of female leadership and females as part of our population. But I think it's really understanding the problem and talking about it and not being afraid to have the hard conversation, which is critical.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. I think it's time for you to tell us more about Shannon and her extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership. So this is interesting because it's one of the core, really foundations of leadership that I subscribe to. I think good leaders take ownership and are accountable. And I coach my team on this constantly. We show up, we take ownership, we make commitments, we're accountable, and we're part of the solution, not the problem. It doesn't matter if we created the problem or not. And this is how you gain trust, respect, you build relationships across the organization with your peers, and ultimately deliver on a culture of high performance.
Great, thank you. So tell us a little bit more about your pioneering vision for making IT a business driver rather than just an enabler. And are you an engineer first or a leader first?
As much as I love technology, I think a leader first. Technology for technology's sake is really just that. I think if you're not solving a business problem or delivering real value to the organization, then you're just running a lab. Of course, investing in foundations and innovation are critical, but I think it needs to be done with a constant eye to the business impact. And really, this relentless focus on technology as a business enabler changes the dialogue and the relationship with the business. For me, this is critical. I always joke that I tease the team that everyone loves to hate. But when you're constantly bringing value to the business, ideas, delivering value, showing results and how it's impacting the bottom line, it really makes you a partner and not just a shared service center. And this is a game changer.
Thank you. So let us know a little bit more about you. How are you raising your teenager kids any differently or similarly as you have been raised?
That's a tough question. I think I have two teenage sons. One has just started university, the other is in high school. And if I think about how I'm raising them, it's probably very different than how I was raised. Although I would say that it's built on the foundations and values that both my husband and I grew up with. The focus for me definitely has shifted from being less achievement oriented. Growing up, if one of my test results wasn't in the 90s, my parents were challenging me as to why not. As a parent now, I think I try to make sure my kids are challenged and achieving their potential, which is subtly different than, constantly striving for the 90s across the board. And it wasn't really an easy shift. I also know from 20 years of working that being passionate about what you do is way more important than aspiring to a specific career that your parents think you should undertake. So I'm constantly learning and evolving my parenting style, and I'm learning from my kids as well.
Great. So that's interesting. So what is your goal in life? Do successful women still have future further aspirations?
Of course, I have future aspirations, but I think what's most important to me, and I think COVID really caused a lot of reflection. on what is important and what drives you individually. But for me, it's to stay challenged and passionate about what I'm doing. I love solving problems and driving real transformational change. And like Christi said, I love growing talent and investing in the future generations. Spending time with our new grad program, working with females, starting their career in technology, trying to remove some of the barriers that they're facing. These are things that give me immense fulfillment in my work. And so for me, it's less about what the next role is. I think it's more about being fulfilled in what I'm doing. 10 years ago, though, the answer might have been very different.
Great. That was a question for Christi. I'd rather kind of have you answer this. Shannon, how did you navigate the boys' club at work when men network amongst themselves, build trust, relationships, and support each other? This is coming from Anjali. When as a woman, it's not easy to be part of these groups and still continue to grow through the ranks. You are the only woman leader in IT amongst your peers, a group dominated by men. I think it's true for you as well.
It is true, absolutely, and it's not easy. It's never been easy. I started my career in network, which was even more male dominated than IT is. And one of my first project assignments, I was relocated to Europe to work at a telco company there, deploying network technology, and I was the only female. And most of the colleagues I was working with were double my age. And so it took a long time to gain their trust. I was never part of the boys club, and I feel like I had to be twice as effective in my role to compensate for the fact that, it took a long time to gain their trust. But I think, looking back, I wonder, would I be the leader I am today if I didn't have those challenges? Because it pushed me. It pushed me to be better. It pushed me to be confident in what I was doing, to make sure I was always prepared, and that I focused on facts and data to drive decision making, and used that as a strength to win them over time. Now I look around the table, and still lots of male faces. But I look at my team, and my leadership team is 50-50 males and females, and I'm incredibly proud of that and the culture that brings. So I think that those challenges and really trying to fit in makes you realize that, being you is more important than fitting into a stereotype or fitting into a club. And I think it gives you a lot more confidence in your unique journey and what you bring to the table as a leader.
Great. So this is my personal question. I have seen over the last few years with Women's Day, with a lot of equality slogans coming up, women being glorified. I've seen that, okay, no one can care as much as a mother. No one can become an assistant as much as diligent as a woman can be. Christi is a knowledge leader. No one organizes the house like a woman can. I, is it important to glorify women and keep them in their same roles that they are, or is it important to give them the next best opportunity or bring them and let them drive you? Are men scared of women?
I don't think men are scared of women. I think that, we've evolved significantly over the last 20 years. And I don't even want to think back to some of the challenges I had in the early days. And I never want females today to experience that. And so I feel an immense responsibility to create the culture and the environment that allows people to take that next challenge. I think that, gender stereotypes, of course, they exist and they will continue to exist. But I think that we need to use the opportunity to celebrate and amplify the voices of women that are doing unique and interesting things. And, I think Break the Bias is a great example of that with Women's Day, is to amplify voices, to understand the unique things that women are doing. And also to show that, gender stereotypes, aren't necessary and shouldn't cloud our judgment on what people are capable of. My encouragement to females definitely in our organization is to put up your hand, volunteer for things that scare you. And, back to Christi's point, we can do hard things. Oftentimes I find we have to push and coax our colleagues to get out of their comfort zone, because that's when the magic happens, when we commit to that. And I think that it's harder sometimes for females to get out of their comfort zone and to break out of what they know they're good at. But like I said, that's where the magic happens.
Sure. Two questions as a fallout from here. One is coming from Bharti here. She's asking, how do you find work-life balance while playing an executive role?
That is never easy. I think you need to prioritize balance. And I say it, but in all honesty, I have not been great at it through my career. I think it's important to understand what are the most critical things to you, and then how do you make time and space for that. And I'll give you an example. During COVID, I was sitting in front of screens all day and I was missing being outside. And I said, you know what? Every day at lunch, I need an hour to go for a walk. And at first, people were booking meetings and they weren't respecting it. And now I can honestly say every single day, except today, because I'm on this call, I break at lunch, I go outside for fresh air, and I am a better leader in the afternoon after I've had that break and that time just to, think and have quiet time and get some fresh air and exercise. So I think you prioritize what's important for you. When my kids were younger, it was having dinner as a family every night. Never mind, I might go back and do 2 or 3 more hours of work after dinner. But I think that often we feel people won't accept if we put barriers in place and say, you know what, no, I'm having dinner with my family, or I am going outside for fresh air. But what I've found over the years is people actually respect it when you speak up and say, I need to do this, and I will be better for it.
Thank you so much. I think I would just like to ask you one important question here. You talked about your experiences of challenges and facing challenges and building trust. Would you like to mind sharing any one experience that we can take away back and kind of reflect upon? Experience of facing a challenge and building trust.
I think for me, if I think about challenges personally, it's been valuing myself and what I bring to the table. And I'll share something that really inspired me that happened a couple of years ago. I had a female leader in my organization come to me and ask for a raise. And she was so nervous. She came to me and I could tell she was nervous. And she came with industry data. She came with a list of her achievements, and she explained to me why she felt she was deserving of this raise. And at the end of the conversation, I think she probably had no idea what I was going to say. And I thanked her and I said, wow, impressed at the data you've assembled, but also impressed at your courage. And she really inspired me. And if I think about the challenges, it's valuing yourself more than anything, really, the value you bring to the table. And in that moment, I looked up to her and I felt inspired that I probably hadn't done that for myself enough through the years. So I think that is critical as we encourage females in technology specifically, but across the board for really everyone, is value yourself, know your worth, don't underestimate it, and ask for what you deserve.
Thank you, Shannon. I think at this juncture, let's welcome Jeralyn Quintin. Perfect segue here. She is the Global Total Rewards Leader, Compensation, Benefits, and Payroll Strategy and Design at MediaKind. She has held roles in human resources at Ericsson for over 2 decades. She's an accomplished global total rewards leader and builder of successful total reward programs that meaningfully drive culture, employee engagement, and business performance. Her strong leadership skills have been exhibited through partnership, coaching, team building, effective communication, and collaboration. She's a driver of professional excellence in the implementation of business strategy while effectively navigating in a changing business and social economic environment. Jeralyn, as you can imagine, we have worked together in the past. I have lots and lots of questions for you, but let me ask you from where Shannon left. Tell us a little bit more about how, as a total rewards leader, you have broken the bias for several women.
Thanks, Shruti. Again, thanks for having me. And actually listening to what Christi and Shannon is saying, I mean, like I was smiling, it was not in the background. I mean, you can see me, but leaders such as what Christi and Shannon had just said, as female leaders sitting in executive roles of how they've pushed, is actually a good example of what takes us to the next phase to make sure we break the bias. So from a total rewards, which, we're typically behind the scenes supporting our executives, managers, and how to build programs, how to do equitable pay, right? Those are the points, like what Shannon was saying, like make sure setting your targets, right? The benchmarking, sourcing. I mean, a true example of what that female talent that went to her and say, here's my research, and having that courage. So from a total rewards perspective, those are actually factors that we looked into when we're doing structure setting, a little bit technical probably from a total reward space, that those are things that we're looking at, that we support the leaders such as Shannon and Christi to make sure we arm them with the right tools. So from a total reward space, that's what we do. From a people partner perspective, this is where the other phase of HR, where we support leaders to say, okay, let's look at, are you hiring or are you doing a promotion? Those are key elements we looked at. The sourcing the right talent, make sure you have enough talent pool that you're looking at and that you're not myopic and just looking at very specific things. So it's a joy for me to listen to how Shannon and Christi, and so for female leaders that's on this call, or for young professional that's on the path of we're aspiring to be executives, don't lose sight of that. We do have the power for the next generation to set them up on that path.
Great. Thank you. And a question for you then. Born and raised in Philippines, you've done your grad school in US, you have kind of moved between continents. Does your background or anyone's personal background ever affect into other kind of biases, whether it is not necessarily about the gender bias, but other kind of biases about language bias, about age bias, for example, or a capability bias? Does where you come from and where you be influence that? And if so, and if you have colleagues around which possibly are biased because of a certain way of being raised, how do you break that? And how in your life do you think you have faced this and broken it?
Great question, and a difficult one. But so having born and raised, I think coming to the US, I personally have a consciousness for myself and the people around me that there's a difference, right? I was brought up a different way, they're brought up different way. Just like sometimes in discussions we have, whether it's a specific show that they watch growing up, that they're a phrase that they catch on, and I'm gonna look at them and have a blank. It's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. But it's because how they were brought up, the TV shows that they were watching. So early on, being here in the US, I have the consciousness. And I've always said, even to my daughter, as like consciousness goes a long way, because then when you know it's there, then you can plan and think through what is a reaction to it. It may be an emotional or a natural question. You just say, what does that mean? And or the continuous, so what? Have I observed it personally were a reaction because of a different perspective? Yes. How have I maybe directed or navigated that conversation? It's more of a thought-provoking question to get them to see where I'm coming from or somebody in the room is coming from. So it's a lot of sometimes like trying to help them to get there to the realization versus me reacting to what was being said. Partly, I think, as an HR professional or as a people partner, when we're coaching leaders or just mentoring people to help them navigate through those challenges, that's the natural way to say, okay, don't react, don't be emotional, but actually say, okay, where are they coming from? Because is it the lack of consciousness or the lack of education for that matter?
Sure. So Jeralyn, tell us a little bit more about Jeralyn, because I know you've told me that when you see something in people, people don't see even that in themselves. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, so it excites me. Somebody asked me last week, like, what's the most rewarding thing that you do as a leader? And for me, and so if anybody in my team is actually on the call, I hope they could resonate with it. Throughout my profession within my team, or even somebody of my peers team members, where as you work with them, as you work on projects or just meetings, that you hear what they're passionate about, is having to help them navigate or map them to there by giving them special projects or offering them different opportunities, so they can see and how those competence come out of them. So that's, to me, is the most rewarding thing, because I could see. And as I was reflecting on our discussion, actually, Shruti, I realized I experienced that in more than one occasion. I have a finance background by education, but for the past 15 years, I've been in an HR world doing total rewards or being people partner. And it's because a female executive, our SVP of HR at Ericsson, said, I think you will be good in HR. I looked at her at that time and I have this big question mark on my face. It's like, I'm in finance, I'm in accounting at that time. I said, what would make you think? No, I think you'll be good at it. I just know it. And I said, I'll do it for 18, 24 months. And that was 15 years ago. And then another situation is the same. I was in the total reward space. A female HR leader said, I think the next step for you is to be a people partner, lead an organization and the people team in the Bay Area. And I was nervous. It's getting outside of my comfort zone because I've never been a people partner. But it's people seeing the potential in you and believing you can do it. So I think that's the joy that I get to do with my team, developing whatever. It doesn't always even have to be changing a position. It's actually being able to do something that they have never done. And they thrive and they succeed. 2-3 months later, they have a big smile on their face and they're going to come to you and say, what's next? What's that next challenge you want from me?
Thank you, Jeralyn. Jeralyn, I don't know if you know that, but you have smashed 4 of my next questions that I had for you, actually. I was going to ask you, why do we see more girls in HR and more boys opting for finance or business when they do their MBA? I was going to ask you a tough question about gender parity, quality of pay in the industry. I think you've smashed all of that. So let me just ask you a very simple question.
Yeah.
How are you raising your daughter, your niece, and your ideal woman colleague?
So my daughter just started university. She is in computer engineering. Throughout her, since even middle school, she was on the path of wanting to be in the computer in the STEM area. My siblings and I, and if I was reflecting, preparing for this, like, how has it really been? My mom, my grandmother, the women lineage. And I remember my sister telling my niece, she said, you came from a lineage of very strong-willed women, which as a mother, I have to be careful too, because my daughter is very strong-willed. And as a mother, you have to figure out how to kind of hone that in sometimes. I would say from raising her, it's the same. To focus, to make sure she focus on what she wants and nobody to tell her no. I didn't know this until she was applying for university, the essay writing. In one of the essay writing, she actually said in middle school, she was in a computer class, the intro to computer science. She was the only girl in the class. One of her classmates asked, what are you doing in this class? Because she was a female. She just looked at him, and at that time, she didn't understand the question. Later on, she realized it was because she was then the only female. But as she did the coding, she did more coding, and when she's the only one can answer the questions in the class, and that's when she realized, I can do it. I can thrive. So from that perspective, we push her to make sure she's still focused on what she wants to do and that she will have challenges. She's already experienced it. And as she grows up too, and she's like, Mommy, this is just so difficult. And then sometimes we said, it's the difficult things you learn. And if it's too easy, why would you even do it? So she kind of got stuck. With my niece, it's the same thing. She actually recently, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, she had to apply for a new position. And she reached out to me from an HR perspective, and it's on her compensation. It's just like, how do I position myself to know, to say, what do I even know how much to negotiate? It's arming her with, the resources, right? And kind of telling her and guiding her that, how do you do the conversation? How do we practice? And so for young aspiring professionals that's in this call, find them a mentor, or just do a role play. Find a sponsor. It would help practice, and I'm sure Shannon, probably, hopefully, the talent that reached out to you had that opportunity to find somebody to actually do those dialogue, role playing, as they say.
Thank you. I think, Jeralyn, it brings us to the most important part of this entire discussion, the role of men in our life, the role of men mentors in our life, men and women alike. So I want to ask you if you can share about any tough time in your career and how you've received support from men.
So tough time in when I vividly remember there was one, I applied for a position. It was probably the next level manager position. It would be the second opportunity that I had. I applied for a role. I was competing with 2 male. Unfortunately, I didn't secure that role. The person who secured that role was a male who's more senior in experience, more senior in everything, right, with the company. Not only did I not get that position, I had to report to that person who got the job. Early in my career, lack of maturity, probably, right? I reacted. I was emotional. I was mad. I was angry because, like, why not? And then you want me to report to that person, right? It's like, But a female leader coached me, which is the CFO at that time. She said, it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey. But rest assured, she said, I have your back. You have my support, right? So from that perspective, I went in, I did the job. It was very difficult because even the principal, or it's just different. So from that perspective, I think from my career, that was probably the most difficult one. Securing support for a male executive. Fortunately, I was lucky because they were some of the leaders that saw my potential, recognized the results and accomplishments I've did, whether it be in a small project or in a big project. And from there, that's how you get the sponsorship. And when you actually have those connections, try to grow the relationship just to make sure you have it. So, I mean, I have a good relationship with the chairman of our board, who is a former CEO, and I continue to make sure I have that relationship, and other even executives within the company.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeralyn. I think we've got no panel is complete without an applaud for the attendees, more importantly, who've been kind of consistently listening to us and sharing their questions here on chat. I have one more question for you, Jeralyn. As an HR leader, can you talk about the importance of women's health and HR initiatives for the same?
It is very important because it's hard to kind of proceed if you're forgetting about yourself. So just like Shannon was saying, sometimes I myself don't do a good job at it, that I actually have to set boundaries to make sure that I do the same. So as an example, we're in the age of technology, especially like during COVID, you're always connected. You have your phone, you have your laptop or your iPad, right? You're sitting down. I had to actually draw the line at some point to rate. The minute I shut down on Friday, I don't look at my laptop. I leave it in a different room. It doesn't even, cannot even use the same room. Make sure you have it, because it's very important in that, because then you get recharged, you get re-energized. From an HR initiative perspective, we drive wellness. During COVID, right? There was a lot of focus on mental wellness. It's important. At the end of the day, I think with all the whether it be even ads in the TV or in the app that you see, it makes a big difference when you have a clear mind to start your day or start your afternoon. It is very important. The one thing I failed to say earlier, and I think Shannon with Christi, any accomplishment you do, and females I think don't do it as much, please make sure you celebrate. I tell the same thing to my daughter when she's like, Mommy, I did good in an exam, or she did something good in a writing, because she loves to write as well. Don't forget to celebrate. It's very important, because it's what's going to charge you for the next one. At least even for 5 minutes, I promise. Makes a whole world of difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as we come to the close of this, I think I want to invite the woman that I admire a lot in my company, and she is Debbie Menin. She is here. She is the pioneer of these Women in Technology series for Tech Mahindra. And for 1.5 years, she has led us all here. I look up to her. I do share with her, Jeralyn, about problems at work and otherwise at home as well. And she's always been supportive. She's always been that guiding light. I want, Debbie, for you to share your story and tell us about how you feel. You've been in the industry for so long. You're a rocking star of the media and entertainment world. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Any questions you have for our panel today?
Well, first I want to say Shruti has always been a mentor of mine. So right back at you. I've really been enjoying listening instead of moderating today, because it's really giving me a chance to hear what you're saying, and I'm loving your stories. Instead of telling you about my story, I actually want to tell you a story. I recently went on to Ancestry.com and found some cousins, and long story short, my grandmother was part of the Gillespie family. One of the daughters is a lady named Margaret Cousins. It was Margaret Gillespie. When she was 8 years old, she got on a donkey with a saddle. The side saddle was broken, so she threw her leg over it just like a man would. And that night she got in a lot of trouble with her father because she wasn't being a woman. So it was really from that day forward, she really spearheaded this equality scenario. Now, I'm talking about a girl in Ireland. So I'm going to try to make a long story short here. There's a book written about her that I can't wait to read. I just got it. It's called Through the Eyes of Margaret Cousins. So when she was in Ireland, she formed the Irish Women's Franchise League. She ended up in prison many times, by the way. Has anyone seen the movie Suffragettes yet? You can watch it on Netflix in England. She's really this person in Ireland, but she moved to India in 1920. And she continued her march in India. So she was the first non-Indian woman to be a magistrate in India. She wrote the music to the India national anthem. She formed the first All-American Women's Conference in Pune. There's 200,000 women members today. She conceived the idea of the All-American Women's Conference. But most importantly, and this I love, she helped spearhead the rights for women to vote in India. Now that is a lasting legacy. She wrote 3 books. There was one written for her here. Basically, she had this golden gift of bringing people together, this deep, sincere humanity and passion for justice. She drove for spiritual force and enabled her to become the huge dynamo for change, a lot like the 3 of you on this call today. So let me say this. As you just heard Shruti say, I've been moderating these webinars about women empowerment. Let's go back 100 years ago. 100 years ago, this woman did what she did in India and provoked change. So let's really celebrate everything that's been accomplished for Women's Day over the last 100 years. So really, here's my question for you. If you were 100 years ago, actually, I'm going to ask Shannon. You said 10 years ago, things would be different. If it was 100 years ago, my question to you, Shannon, would you have done anything to push the boundaries and the biases to help women vote 100 years ago, no matter what country you were in?
I really hope I would have. I think at the end of the day, your spirit, what makes you, perseverance, adaptability, passion, desire for change. I really hope that would have been with me if I lived 100 years ago, and I would have been at the forefront of pushing for change. I live with that hope that I would have been there and I would have been a change agent, much like I feel I am today. I think that that's who I am.
Wonderful. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I want to sign off, and I want to leave that question with all of you that are listening today. Would you have done that, and what would you have done, and how would you have done it? I think it's such a great question. So I am so inspired today, and I want to celebrate Women's Day with Shruti and everyone else at Tech Mahindra. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Debbie, Shannon, Jeralyn, and Christi. Well, I would just like to end by saying that what you see in the mirror is not you. It is always your reflection, right? So what we as women are today is just a reflection of the men and the women around us who support us, enhance us, follow us, lead us, rectify us, and celebrate us. So let's dare to break barriers and biases that the society has created. More power to women, and cheers to a beautiful world of equality and freedom. Thank you.